So it's more different kinds of food. The reason I have this all slide is to remind you that these foods are okay. No matter how many times you were told not to eat, but I'm trying to emphasize these foods are okay, everything. Now we're going to, where's that slide? Okay, this is another good slide. But here, this slide, this number signifies the glycemic load. Later on, we will learn what glycemic load means and glycemic index mean. Every diabetic must know these terms, glycemic index and glycemic load. Very, very important to learn. Okay, so this is very interesting. This topic I really want to get across. You have heard so many times, our carbs are bad for diabetes. You can't eat carbs. You can't eat starch. Some people say you can't eat fruit. And the reason that I mentioned insulin resistance prior to this carbs is that in those top 4 causes of insulin resistance, there was no carbs. Carbs does not cause diabetes. It can worsen your diabetes. Okay, if you're having a high fever and if you up the temperature or in your house, then yes, that can worsen your ability to fight the fever. But that's not the cause of diabetes. Okay, so that's something really important point. So first point I mentioned, is fever bad during infection? No, fever is not bad. Fever is just telling you that immune system is working. If you're not having a fever and infection, that's a trouble. That's something else going on. Okay? So fever is just a natural response of fighting the infection. Okay? Sugar, high sugar is just telling you something going on in your body. Fix it. Okay? That's what sugar is telling you. We're going to learn a little bit about glycemic index, glycemic load next slide. So again, trying to emphasize, treat the cause, not the symptoms. That's important. Just controlling, reducing the sugar, your hemoglobin A1C is under 7, but you are on 4 different medications, that is not treating the disease. You're just controlling the sugar. That's all you're doing with that. All of those medications that we use for diabetics. There are not any good, there is no good medications for diabetes. Although there is a significant case that you can make that if you don't reduce the sugar and you don't change insulin resistance, definitely you can make a case that you need to be treated. You need to lower the sugar until you fix the insulin resistance. So I'm not saying that stop taking all your medications. You still have to lower your sugar until you work on the underlying cause of diabetes. That's very important. So treat the cause, not the symptom. Very important to understand. Now, there are other aspects of fruits. I hear this every single time diabetics comes to me and my previous doctor or somebody told them, I'm not allowed to eat fruits. I cannot eat bananas, I cannot eat this, and I cannot eat that because I'm diabetic. And I always scratch my head. I don't know what they're talking about. Where are they learning all this stuff? Okay, so usually the unripened fruit are better than, it's like white banana versus brown banana, you know. So unripened fruit, early on, as soon as you buy in the first few days, and if you're not going to eat the first few days, you may put in the refrigerator to slow down the ripening process, okay, especially in summer. So the unripened fruit, better. What happens, and from unripening to the ripening, what happens is a natural way of processing. That's a natural process of that complex sugars become more simpler to absorb, and that is very dangerous for diabetes. So that's the point about fruits there. But later on we'll look at it, why fruits are not bad. The excess carbs are bad. And here we are saying that excess refined and processed carbs are bad. Okay? If you get carbs from whole food or whole carbs, they could be even bad if you're in excess. Moderate amount of whole food carbs are okay. You don't have to go totally low on it. And moderate whole carbs are definitely okay. The low carb could be effective for the weight loss, but it is not an ideal diet for our physiological system the way we're made. And I don't know how many times you were told, go low carb, low carb, low carb, weight loss and how often you are able to sustain that diet and how often you fail all the time. And the reason is not your fault. The reason is that you're just given a wrong message. It's not a sustainable diet for a long time. And that's why almost every single diet has come in the last 50 years. Everybody lost the weight in the beginning. By the time all the diet became very famous, they made all the money, people realized that, oh, everybody gained weight back, and they all ran away. So you can lose weight with low carb very effectively, but not necessarily you're treating the insulin resistance and not necessarily you're treating the diabetes, but you might get the weight loss, maybe some reductions in carb storage or adipose tissues might improve some diabetes, but ultimate insulin resistance often not being addressed by doing that. Excess carbs with excess fat, that's total disaster. Total disaster. Because the excess fat creates the insulin resistance, and the excess carbs you can't get rid of because you have insulin resistance. Now you're really infiltrating all your organs with sugar, and that you can damage eye, kidney, and various other organs. So that's number 7 is absolutely problematic. This is the average diet. I call it SAD diet, which is standard American diet. So this is the major problem in America. Excess carbs, excess refined carbs with the excess bad fat, like saturated and trans fats. So that's number 7 is essentially the problem that we need to solve. Now, I said carb is okay, so it doesn't mean that you go on and keep eating desserts. What's the problem with desserts? A lot of refined and processed sugars in desserts. So that's not good. That's not really good. Most people identify with desserts as happiness or joy. But when you actually spell desserts, it's called stress diet. So it will give you just happiness for the moment, but it will create the miseries of lifetime, especially for diabetics. So that's something that we need to understand. Now, if you can make desserts from whole carbs, or you can use dates and honey and various other things, that's pretty reasonable. But the problem is the processed refined carbs. That's the problem. So this term that I said every diabetic should have. Again, most patients are not taught about this. We learn about this time in our physicians conference and continuing medical education. Why people are not taught? This is very, very relevant terms that we need to learn. So what glycemic index means is that after you eat any food that has an immense amount of potentiality of spiking the sugar. That's the high glycemic index that your sugar spikes right away after eating. So essentially refined or processed sugars. When you eat that, your sugar spikes right away. What happens when sugar spikes in your body? Insulin goes up too. And so all the extra sugars that you eat, if you don't need it, insulin will take those sugar and transform into a storage mechanism, or some sugars will turn into a fat. So if you have a high index sugars, would really bad, because most of the calories that you're eating will go directly into storage mechanisms, so that what happens 30 minutes, after 1 hour, you're hungry again. That's the problem with a high index food, because all the sugar is all taken away from your body by insulin. So now you're getting low sugar now. So now you need to eat more. So it creates more sort of like a addiction. So spike and crash, spike and crash. It's like little kids when we give them sugar, they got all the energy and they crash 30 minutes later. That happens to adults as well. We just know how to manage better, But it happens to us. And not only this glycemic index or spike and the crash, not only it disturbs your physiological system, but it also disturbs the mental system. As you know that the brain can use only primarily carb. They can use ketone bodies, but primarily carbs for the energy. So if you go on low carb, you realize that your focus, your attentions, it gets really disturbed, because brain knows only one way to have energy is carbs. Excuse me. So if you constantly spike and crash, you're also going to create those spike and crash in the brain, and maybe it might also disturb your mental health. So people who eat high processed refined sugars, they will have more mental health issues. Most people can manage it. Sometimes it could be out of control. So mental health is also very, very, that's why there are some of the disease, I think it was the ADD, or there's some research done on ketogenic diets, so totally no carbs and ketogenic diet improves some of the ADD or attention. That kind of goes with that idea. So spike and crash, that's the high glycemic index. So it releases energy very quickly and makes you feel hungry sooner, and then you eat more. What is the food that has a low glycemic index? They don't have a spike. They slowly increase the sugar in your body. That releases energy slowly and makes you feel full longer, and you eat less. So you don't have to eat protein and fat to suppress the hunger. You can eat the better carbs and can do the same thing. Okay? And on the top of that, you don't get the bad side effects of the bad fatty foods that we eat and bad proteins that we eat. So that's the advantage of the eating better carbs that has a low glycemic index. Glycemic load is essentially total content of the carb in the food. That's the glycemic load. So easy to understand that all diabetics has to eat low glycemic index and low glycemic load carbs, because this is another way of treating your diabetes a little better than just going on low carb and getting tired all the time. Okay, so that's a very interesting concept. Now, as far as the value, there are more values you need to learn. Glycemic load under 10 and glycemic index under 55. So we'll look at it, the glycemic load and index of every single fruit, and they all fall into low and low, as long as they're unripened. And that's why fruits are not bad. They come into a good glycemic index. All the whole food, vegetables and fruits, they all are low glycemic index and low glycemic load. Only exception is watermelon. But watermelon has a very low glycemic load and very high glycemic index. Anyhow, but there are some exceptions to that. But as a large concept, the whole food, fruits and vegetables, are having a very low glycemic index and load in general. So this is all different kinds of fruits that you can eat. And there are some fruits are better than other, depending on what glycemic index and glycemic load they have. But also the fruits, this is another aspect of whole food, is you don't eat carbs, you don't eat protein, you don't eat fat, you eat food. Okay? So when you eat fruits, you're not only eating carbs, you are having so many other benefits by eating fruits. So if you deprive yourself from fruits because you're scared because of sugar and carbs, you are really depriving for many other essential nutrients. Okay? So this is all you can eat. Okay? So every time I get asked, a diabetic, they come to me and ask me, what can I eat? I mean, there's so many food you can eat. Okay? So this is the chart that talks about 32 different fruits. And they're ranked based on their complete nutritional values. They are ranked all the way on the top. If you see, blackberries is all the way on the top. Grape is probably the worst fruit you can eat. But still, look at the grapes here. Glycemic load that we talked about. Glycemic load, 6. Even grape is the worst fruit and a total nutrition value. Its glycemic load is only 6. And earlier, we see here, where does glycemic load 6 comes here? Right here. So I hope that's something interesting. Then, so like I said, we're not eating we are not eating only carbs, we're also eating entire fruits. Yes?
Could you go back over what you just said about the
Grapes?
grapes?
What about grapes?
Show you graph.
Uh-huh.
They were bad. You serve.
No, so let me rephrase myself. So grapes are the bottom, the worst fruit out of this 32. But even that, the glycemic load is 6, and even the worst fruit to eat, still a very good for diabetics. Yeah. Right. Yes?
What serving size is that?
That's 100 gram.
And that's only fresh, right?
Whole food, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
fresh.
this is no canned, frozen,
Yeah,
anything.
yes.
It's totally fresh.
So term when I use whole food, everybody knows, but let me give my understanding of what whole food is. Whole food means the food as grown in the nature. No processing in between, no cooking in between, or very minimum cooking. You don't have to cook fruits. And almost no oil in between. Okay, that's what I term as a whole food. So all the berries, if you look at here, berries, raspberries, they tend to be have a very high antioxidant index. High antioxidant index means anti-inflammatory, anti-radical, anti-aging, anti-cancer, all that stuff. That's what antioxidant means. So almost all the fruits are very high in this antioxidant index, and blackberries being on the top. Okay? Yes?
The question was, is that particular handout back here, and if not,
This handout is not there. Yeah, but we can always.
be a particular place where you would just find that?
Just tell us the source of that.
Yeah, we will close that later. Yeah, yes. Definitely. And you can look it up here as it's one of the websites called Lean It Up. That's where I found it. But we can definitely email it to you if you have shared your email address. All right, so like earlier I said, that fruits are not just the carb, but even if you look at the carb, they are very good. But look at the other columns. Antioxidants, very important. We all are afraid of cancers, inflammations, aging. Everybody's afraid of aging. Look at there. The fruits are very good on that antioxidants. Omega-3, everybody's talk about it. One thing comes to your mind is fish, but nobody talks about fruits. Okay? Then you got potassium. Everybody thinks about banana, but nobody talks about all the other fruits that have even more potassium than banana. Vitamin K, E, C, all kinds of stuff is there. Fiber, calories. Obviously, the avocado is the highest number of calories because avocado has a very high amount of good fat, which is called a monounsaturated fat and polyunsaturated fat. So the avocado oil is becoming very popular. It hasn't hit the popular market yet, but that's something next in coming. But there are all different kinds of nut oils that we have. Or seed oils or the plant oils. But so that's what I want to get in this 10 columns. What I want to get across is that if with the fear of carbs, you are missing out all this stuff. And even that fear is, I consider, as a phobia more than real fear. So that's something really need to understand how important this aspect of the nature that we should daily consume. Providing that we reduce saturated and trans fat in our diet. Otherwise, this may cause a problem. All right.